Hey everyone, today I wanted to do a video review of my Arsenal SLR-107. This one specifically is the FR version, chambered in 7.62x39. Figured I'd walk you through some of the modifications that I've made, how it's held up after as many rounds as I have through it, and show you some of the internals so you can see how it's wearing and what my anticipated life expectancy is out of this rifle based on the wear that it has up to this point. Now clearly this one looks very different than the one that you're going to get out of the box, so I'll go ahead and start at the end, walk all the way up to the muzzle, and we'll take a closer look. Alright, so starting with the buttstock, I want to mention one of my favorite features about this rifle, and that you actually have the trap door here so that you can have a cleaning kit with you. Those of you who are familiar with these cleaning kits know that there are very, very few things that you can't do as far as working on your AK with that cleaning kit. In my opinion, it's one of my favorite features of some AK-47s out there, the fact that you can carry a cleaning kit with you wherever you go. I know to some people that's not a big deal, but in my own experience, I've gotten a lot of use out of both the cleaning kit and the cleaning rod, which I'll mention later. So to me, that's kind of a must-have for any sort of go-to-war gun or a gun that you're going to use for any serious usage. So moving up, oh, and also I want to mention that it is a standard Warsaw pack length buttstock, so for those of you who like a little bit of a longer stock, you might either have to add a pad to it or get one of the models with the longer buttstock. But moving forward, we do have a sling swivel here that freely rotates, and attached to it I have a original SOE bungee sling. That's a single point, double point bungee sling. So I like typically running my slings in a single point configuration. However, there are times when it's nice to have a 2-point configuration. Attached to it, I have one of their TK4 tourniquet pouches, which I think are really cool. Basically, you open this up, you pull this string, and a TK4 tourniquet comes flying out. In my opinion, tourniquets are a must-have in any sort of serious duty gear setup, so having one actually attached to your rifle is great, especially if you're going to be using a gun for home defense. You're not going to totally get geared up head to toe when you hear someone break a window at 2 o'clock in the morning, so as long as you have one attached to your rifle, it's going to go wherever you go. Alright, so moving forward, this one does have the folding stock, so you push in on this little button and it allows you to fold the stock. Now the nice thing about the way I have my sling set up is it will allow me to actually get it locked in the closed configuration, and then to release that you just push this button up here and then it folds out. Now a lot of folding stock AKs out there don't have a very good lockup when it's fully open, but I mean this one I can mess around with it all I want and all you're going to hear is the bolt rattling around. It's not actually going to give you any sort of play as far as the stock itself, so it's a very, very solid stock. Generally speaking, unless I'm hurting for storage, I'm not going to use this in the folded configuration. I'm going to just leave it open. In my opinion, it's almost useless to shoot an AK without some sort of buttstock, so this is going to allow you to do that very easily, very effectively. Now for those of you who like using the scope rail on the other side, which this one does come with, unfortunately you're not going to be able to fold the stock with a optic mounted to it. However, since I don't use that, it's not an issue for me, and me personally, I much prefer stocks that fold off to the left side of the rifle as opposed to the right side of the rifle, because if it folds off to the right, it's going to really impede the function if I do have to use it folded. But again, I would say 99% of the time I'm not going to shoot this thing with the stock folded. Alright, so moving forward, I've replaced the standard peg grip that comes with the SLR-107 with a Hogue grip. I really like the Hogue grip. It gives you a little bit more to grab onto. It's also kind of got that rubberized texture that feels really good in your hand. Now some people don't like finger grooves. For me it works out really well, but just be aware, I believe they make one without finger grooves, so if you don't like finger grooves, that might be the way for you to go. And then right in front of that, I've swapped out the standard Arsenal trigger, which honestly I don't like. I much prefer like the Tapco G2 trigger to the standard Arsenal trigger, but I've went ahead and swapped that out with the ALG AKT trigger, the new trigger from ALG Defense. This trigger is fantastic. For those of you who don't like AK triggers, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't like this trigger. Every single person I've handed this to, whether they be a new shooter or someone who's been shooting for a very long time, they really, really like this trigger. So the AKT trigger, highly recommended. If you're not going to change anything else on your gun, at least do yourself the favor of swapping this out. I want to say it's like $40. So it's really a good deal out there compared to what some nice triggers are out there. So please do yourself the favor of trying out the AKT trigger. You will not be disappointed. But anyway, so moving on from there, I've swapped out the standard safety with the Krebs custom safety. Now, as you can see, when I painted this, I just left the safety closed to block off the receiver. So, you know, if you want, when you paint them, you can take that off as I did on my other ones. But on this one, I just, you know, didn't care enough, got too lazy. So that's, you know, that's that. But I really like the Krebs custom safety just because you have this little tab here, which makes it so much easier to actuate the safety without breaking your firing grip. I know some people out there are very against these. They think that you should train so that you can pick up any AK off the battlefield and not have any training scars, and there is validity to that, don't get me wrong, but for me personally, I just really like the user friendliness of the Krebs custom safeties. For those of you who have like Yugo guns, they do make Krebs custom safeties for those now, but again I really like the Krebs custom safety for me. Alright, so moving forward from there, as far as modifications that I've made, I have a an extended charging handle that I picked up from Circle 10 AK. I'll go ahead and put a link to that. A lot of people say that these things flop around a lot or come loose. Me personally, I used red Loctite and I haven't had a single issue with it. I've probably put probably somewhere close to 300 to 400 rounds through it since I added this, and it hasn't come loose, and that's including dumping 150 rounds through two 75 round drums as fast as I possibly could, and again it didn't come loose at all. So at this point I'm pretty satisfied with it. We'll see if it maintains that throughout the life of the rifle. Alright, so from there, I swapped out the standard Arsenal lower handguard for the Magpul MOE AKM handguard. So again, I didn't have to take off my sling loop up there because it accommodates that. For me, it's just really comfortable. Also, I'm a big Magpul fanboy, so when I saw that Magpul was coming out with AK furniture, I couldn't look away. I just had to do it. So it feels really good in the hand. It gives me the option to attach, an AFG if I wanted to, a vertical grip if I wanted to. If I wanted to, I could put rail sections up here to mount a flashlight, but I'll probably end up doing my flashlight a little bit differently, which takes me to the Ultimac gas tube. This Ultimac gas tube just gives you a lot of very good functionality. I have mounted to it a Primary Arms Advanced Micro Dot. These things are fan-freaking-tastic. This is one of 3 that I own. I've used them in below freezing temperatures in the snow and the rain and the sleet. I've used them in well above freezing temperatures in the 90s and 100s, and again, they function just fine. The dot is very crisp, and as far as mounting it to the gas tube, I haven't had any issues with heat affecting the optic whatsoever. But these are really nice red dots in my opinion, and they are much less expensive than an Aimpoint micro dot. The nice thing about mounting this to an Ultimac gas tube is it allows you to actually co-witness with the iron sights, which I really like. To me, it's not a deal breaker if I can't, but if I have the option to, I would much prefer to have co-witness. But again, as far as mounting a flashlight, what I plan on doing is adding one of the little thorntail mounts and kicking off a Surefire Scout light off to the left side here, so I can actuate it with my thumb. That's probably the one thing that I haven't done to this gun that I probably will do. But again, I think all go-to-war guns should have a flashlight, and that's the one thing that this is lacking. But that's another nice thing about the Ultimac gas tube. It does give you that option off to the other side. Now, moving forward, pretty much from here forward, I haven't made any modifications up to this point. So you'll probably notice the discoloration from the paint everywhere else versus the paint right around the gas block and on the barrel. So what happened was the company I work for, we were testing the new Trijicon MRO red dot sight, and we wanted to kind of do a little bit of a torture test with it without, you know, without the higher propensity of breaking it. So what we decided to do, since we hadn't seen anyone else do anything like this, we wanted to do a heat test with it. So what we did was we took off my primary arms dot, put the Trijicon MRO onto it, and then, like I said earlier, we dumped 150 rounds as fast as I possibly could through this between 2 drums, and I'll roll in some footage of that. It didn't affect the dot whatsoever, and I'll show you some of the results from that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later as well when we talk about accuracy. But it melted off a lot of the paint, it bubbled the paint, obviously left it permanently discolored as far as the paint goes, but it functioned 100%. Any stoppages we had was due to the magazine itself, the drum magazines. One of the ones that I have has a messed up feed lip, so it kind of messed it up a little bit a couple times. But I mean, the rifle itself didn't hiccup at all, and even with the bubbling paint, the steaming paint, or the steam coming off of it, it functioned just fine. And again, no issues with the Trijicon MRO. But anyway, so again, I haven't really made any modifications. It comes with the AK-74 style muzzle brake, and I really like it. It's big and it's heavy, so I'm not going to lie there, but it's very effective at what it does. It keeps your muzzle very flat, it makes it very soft shooting, allows for very quick follow-up shots. Now, it does have a considerable flash, especially as it gets darker, but to me, you know, the benefits outweigh the cons for me, so I really like it. I may swap it out in the future, but I'm certainly not in any hurry to at this point in time. So one thing I mentioned that I probably want to swap out, or one thing that I still want to do, is add a flashlight up here. The only other thing that I want to do is probably swap out the rear sight here for something along, like either do it myself or swap it out for one of the Rifle Dynamics rear sights. That way I have a little bit of a wider notch and rounded off edges. You know, for those of you who are familiar with AK rear sights, you know, this is pretty much as standard as it gets. It works, but again, it's a little bit easier on the eye if you have something like the Rifle Dynamics cuts on the sides and with a little bit of a wider notch in the middle. So that's pretty much the overview of what this rifle has on the outside, and especially the things that I've added to it. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and open it up, take it apart, and show you what the internals look like at this point. Keep in mind, I probably have close to 2,000 rounds through this one specific rifle, so anywhere that you see, keep that in mind. But I'll preface by saying it's looking pretty good for where it's at. Alright, so let's start by talking about the inside of the receiver itself. You might see a little bit of some couple areas where there's still some white lithium grease left over from me not clearing it out totally. But you can see for it having 2,000 rounds through it, it's holding up really, really nicely. Even the rails aren't that worn. You can see some shiny areas where the friction has started to wear the finish off, but for the most part, it's actually holding up fantastically well as far as the finish on the inside. And I will say, even with that, it's extremely smooth operating. I mean, racking the charging handle on it is it's a pleasure. I mean, it just feels so good and it cycles so well. I cannot make it hang up even if I try. But moving on to the actual bolt carrier, if you watched my video talking about the cast versus forged trunnions between the RES from Century and this Arsenal, you've already seen what this looks like up close. Now you can see a lot more areas where it's getting shiny from the friction between this and the bolt carrier, which honestly is to be expected. But I will say there's no crazy mushrooming anywhere. All the parts are still in great shape. The heat treating is holding up fantastically well. The extractor is holding up well. I've had really no limiting of the functionality of this whatsoever. Everything is just holding up as well as you can expect it to. Now, as far as the bolt carrier itself, again, no crazy mushrooming anywhere. The only slight mushrooming is on the end of the bolt carrier here, but again, that's to be expected, and it's by no means anything crazy or out of the ordinary for the amount of rounds that this has through it. Again, you can see kind of shiny areas from the wear, but again, the coating itself is holding up pretty well, and you know, no crazy mushrooming anywhere. Now, you can see some slight tool marks in there, but you know, again, it doesn't affect function whatsoever. If anything, it's just aesthetics, and again, it's functioning just fine. Still a little bit dirty. I haven't cleaned this. Well, I think I wiped it down a little bit before that video talking about forged trunnions, but I honestly don't clean this thing very often, and it still works just fine. As far as the recoil spring, you know, pretty much standard Eastern Bloc recoil spring. Everything works. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and throw this thing back together, and I'll talk about my overall experience with it, some of the quirks that I've had to deal with so far, and just kind of my thoughts in general. So I will say, when I first got this rifle, I ordered it direct from KVAR, but right out of the box, I was immediately met with some disappointment because the front sight was actually canted off to one side, and it forced me to actually drift the front sight all the way as far as I could in order to get it anywhere close to being zeroed. And I'm not gonna lie, I was super disappointed. You know, when I was looking into getting my first AK, almost everyone out there said, Arsenal, Arsenal, Arsenal. If you don't get an Arsenal, you're gonna regret it. So for me to get an issue like that straight out of the box was a huge letdown. You know, that was one of the reasons I stayed away from, you know, Centuries, because people kept saying canted front sights. So to see that on a gun that costs twice as much was a huge letdown. And I kind of just sat on it for a while. I didn't want to do anything about it. And then talking to one of my friends here locally, you know, he was saying Arsenal's the greatest out there. That's unacceptable. Get in touch with them, see if they'll fix it. So sure enough, got in touch with them. They were very easy to work with, very polite. So I sent it back to Las Vegas. They fixed the front sight, and then they even shipped it back with a target that they had zeroed it on to show me that it was actually shooting zero. Then I took it out myself to confirm that, and sure enough, it was spot on. So after getting that canted front sight fixed, this became my favorite AK. So this is one of 3 AKs that I currently own. As I mentioned earlier, I have one of the Century RES-47s, and then I also have a M92 NPAP pistol. And this is, again, going to be by far my favorite. This thing just works so well, and I know it's going to stand the test of time. Judging by the wear that it's got after 2,000 rounds at this point, I have no concerns that it's not going to last, you know, 10 times longer than it already has. So again, after getting that front sight fixed, this thing just became the apple of my eye, so to speak. Now, one of the other issues that I had, and really the only malfunctions that I've had with this thing have been either magazine related or ammo related. One of the early ones that I had was I was shooting some reloaded ammunition that a friend gave me, and I had a squib load, so it got stuck in the barrel. And again, this kind of goes back to why I almost require having a cleaning rod on my AKs. For those of you who don't know what a squib load is, basically you don't have enough powder in the cartridge to dispense or to cause the bullet to actually leave the barrel, so it actually gets stuck partway down. And what I was able to do was I was able to take my cleaning rod, and with a magazine I was able to pound that bullet out. Now, granted, that was just a recreational day of shooting, so it wasn't a life-threatening malfunction. However, if I had been in a survival situation, that would have pretty much shut down my gun if I didn't have something rigid enough to stuff down the barrel. So again, that's personally, with experiences like that, that's why I demand having a cleaning rod on any serious usage rifle, at least as far as AKs go. But other than that, I've really had no crazy issues with this thing. I've had no issues with magazines being seated. For example, this is one of the new M3 AK mags from Magpul with the steel reinforcements, and I have no issues with these locking in or rocking back out. There's really no play whatsoever. And I also have used pretty much any other magazine I can get my hands on, whether that be the original AK mags from Magpul, whether that be the Circle 10 mags, standard surplus steel mags, Tapco mags. They all work just fine, and the drums work just fine. So that's a really nice thing. I know I can pick up whatever mag I need to, and it's going to work. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say, okay, that's all fine and good, but my, you know, $500 Wasser 10 works just as well, and it's going to last just as long. And, you know, I get that, and I'm not going to fault you for saying that. However, you know, sometimes there's a little bit more pride in ownership when you get something a little bit higher end. You know, when in the AR world, you know, One of the reasons I bought my BCM is because I knew that the name was trustworthy, and I knew there wasn't going to be any issues. And if there were any, on the off chance there were issues, I could send it back, get it fixed right away. So that's one of the reasons that I went with the Arsenal. And after buying the Sentry, I have been somewhat disappointed. I'll reference you to my RES-47 review where you know, I have mags that won't seat in it because I have one of the rivets sticking out too far. So things like that I just knew I wasn't going to have to worry about. Again, I was really disappointed about that front sight, but overall this has been a fantastic rifle, and I would not hesitate to recommend one of these to any of you out there who are looking for a rifle. Yes, this is going to be a little bit more expensive than something like a Sentry. However, you know that it's going to work, and you know that it's going to last you a lifetime. I mean, this is the kind of thing where if I ever get too old to run a gun, I can hand this off to one of my kids and know that it's going to last them just as long as it lasted me. But I mean, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about this rifle or anything else, go ahead and throw those in the comment section below. I'll try to get back to you as fast as I can. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want to see more videos from me, go ahead and hit subscribe. But I hope you got something out of this video, and I appreciate you watching.